Assassin's Creed Unity is a game that could have been so much more, but the one thing that stopped it from achieving this goal is simply just Ubisoft. There's quite a lot of positives you can say about this game, such as a flawless parkour system, a stunning backdrop, innovative gameplay mechanics, new animations and so on. Unity offers a stunning handcrafted version of 18th century Paris to explore. And compared to the game that came before, being Assassin's Creed Rogue, the focus shifted to settings that were quite reminiscent of older titles such as Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. The game seemed like it was the reimagining of what everybody had wanted, but sadly it came at a cost, and a heavy cost at that. If you're not aware, Assassin's Creed Unity was in development for over 4 years, making it one of the lengthiest development periods in the Assassin's Creed series. So what makes this game feel like it could have been so much more? Well, that's what I want to go over in this video. Oh, and there will be spoilers in this video, so do remember that. Everything I say is my own opinion, and you may class Unity as your favourite game ever, so try not to get upset if I say something you don't agree with. Anyway, if you do enjoy this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want. It'll help me out a lot, and with that said, let's get into it. The prologue of Assassin's Creed Unity is the perfect description of something that could have been so much more. Before we actually dive into what we all purchased the game for, it tosses us into a somewhat early 14th century flashback scene. Now this is quite surprising, as the prologues in this franchise do not ever attempt to do what Unity did, and what Unity did do is take a step up. We're thrown right into the mix of action, playing as an advisor to Jacques de Molay, Grand Master of the Knights Templar and a sage. Oh yeah, he's a sage. A lot of people don't actually know that he's a sage, which is kind of crazy. Anyway, the prologue forces us to fight as a Templar, with the task of safeguarding a Sword of Eden that belonged to the Templars, as well as the Codex Pater Intellectus, which contained detailed knowledge about the first civilization. The entire prologue is pretty cool, and it's definitely different from what we've come to expect. I believe the last time we had anything remotely similar to a flashback scene was Assassin's Creed Revelations with Altair. Now the reason I think the prologue feels like it could have been so much more is because of the time period and setting of when it takes place. A game that's fully immersed in 14th century Paris, centering on the Knights Templar's decline and the conclusion of the Age of Wisdom, has incredible potential, and I felt like it could have provided a completely fresh perspective, or at the very least it would have injected some much needed mystery into the Assassin-Templar conflict, which honestly sounds much more interesting than what Unity actually delivered, because let's face it, the actual story of Unity is not at all interesting. So if anything, this would pretty much be the second time we get to play as a Templar since Shay Cormac back in Assassin's Creed Rogue. When it comes to Assassin's Creed Unity, there's one thing that nobody can deny, and that the world and setting of this game is simply stunning. Assassin's Creed Unity is set in Paris during the French Revolution. The idea of an Assassin's Creed game set during the French Revolution could only mean good things, right? The often narrow streets, the well-designed buildings, the layouts you can take with Arno. These are just a few things that makes the setting of Unity work so well. I love that the developers took their time with crafting such a city. In fact, historical landmarks were implemented to perfection. Take Notre Dame for example. I'm sure we can all agree that this particular landmark in the game is such a well-detailed building, whether that be from the inside or the outside. The process of creating this particular building was very precise. Factors such as researching, copyright issues, technical limitations and gameplay constraints had to be taken into account just for the Notre Dame building. For one, the development team gathered many reference materials, from photographs to blueprints to historical documents, just to understand the architecture of the Notre Dame. Caroline Misu, I have no idea how to pronounce that, while she's a senior level artist at Ubisoft, spent over 2 years meticulously recreating the Notre Dame. 2 years, just think about that. You often hear Unity praised for having the best graphics in the series, and in many aspects it still holds that title. In fact, this could just be me, but I prefer how Unity looks over games such as Valhalla and Mirage. Sure, the actual graphics are not better, but textures just look more detailed in Unity, and the most important one is facial animations. Unity does this very well, whereas Mirage's facial animations are just horrendous. For me, I need to connect with the world and the characters, and the best way to do this is by making it look as human as possible. Mirage does not do that. Anyway, this is not a Mirage vs Unity video, let's get back on track. It's safe to say Unity's world is the most densely packed world out of the entire franchise. The cool part is that you can actually explore a lot of these buildings, and sometimes you'll find chests and missions tucked away into these houses. When you're climbing with R2, just tap L2 and Arno will swing into windows. Although I do gotta admit, it's not always super smooth. I'll talk more about gameplay later in this video. What's great is that these buildings aren't just empty props. they're full-blown places, making Unity feel way more real and exciting than ever. One of the things that really excites me about Unity's backdrop is how the city transforms throughout the game. In the game's early stages, Paris maintains a relatively peaceful atmosphere, but as the French Revolution gains momentum, so do the intense street protests. The city undergoes significant changes. Buildings start to crumble, barricades arise, and the once calm streets evolve into a fully fledged battlefield. It's a fantastic illustration of how a game's setting can craft a realistic narrative and plunge you, the player, into its world. Now, despite the many positives I mentioned, there are still a few things that can be considered weak points of the world. The first is crowds. Now yes, the crowds in Assassin's Creed Unity are very impressive. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen another video game with such high crowd density. However, the issue I have with Unity's crowds is that they're implemented quite poorly. You know, sometimes the crowds can be seriously intense and make it a real challenge to get around the city. One of my major issues with Unity is how these crowds can mess with my movement. It can be pretty annoying trying to weave through a crowded marketplace or a busy street, since the NPCs don't always clear a path fast enough. This can lead to situations where I find myself stuck in the middle of a crowd, just when I was in the middle of something exciting, like a world event such as chasing a thief. One issue that kind of annoyed me was that no matter what actions you take throughout a mission, there's no real impact on the streets of the city. Arno frequently encounters chances to chase criminals and apprehend thieves, but the citizens of Paris remain unresponsive and their behaviour doesn't change. The murder mystery side missions are probably my favourite pieces of side content in this game, and I do wish they return in a future Assassin's Creed game. Yeah, there was a murder mystery in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but that was definitely a one-off edition. I would love fully fledged side content that is purely murder mysteries, just like how Unity did it. If you actually solve the murder mystery in Assassin's Creed Unity, the game actually offers you a decent reward and provides a refreshing change of pace from the usual gameplay. It's quite unusual that the murder mysteries are not really talked about in reviews or in general, so I figured I should mention it here. So yeah, despite the world of Assassin's Creed Unity being visually stunning, it does lack in some regards. Okay, so now that I've talked about the prologue and the world of Assassin's Creed Unity, the biggest issue for me in this game by far is the story. It's underdeveloped, misplaced, and just wasted. Unity's story had the potential to shine with compelling and interesting characters, but it falls short in investing little emotional depth into the development of Arno and his romantic interest Elise, who is a Templar. Arno's father, an assassin striving for peace with the Templars, is killed when Arno is just a child. The biggest issue with that narrative is the gap in storytelling. Spoiler warning for Assassin's Creed Rogue in 3, 2, 1. So if you played Assassin's Creed Rogue to the end, you'd know that Shay Cormac is the man responsible for killing Arno's father. So why on earth does Assassin's Creed Unity always want to overlook this aspect? In fact, this plot hole is never addressed in the game since the very beginning, where we play as Arno when he's a young child. Arno personally witnessed his father's death in an unusual situation, and the fact that the French Brotherhood quite literally talks about Arno's father as an assassin in front of him makes you wonder why on earth the writing wasn't further explored for this. Arno as a character is an interesting one, but not in ways I would consider him being a top 5. In my opinion, he's perhaps the most underdeveloped protagonist throughout the games. Let's take Connor Kenway for example from Assassin's Creed 3. He's a character who played a pivotal role in shaping America's history. He took part in iconic events like the Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre, and even had connections with George Washington. He was portrayed as a kind of hidden superhero in American history, deeply involved with various important moments. Whereas Assassin's Creed Unity takes a very different approach, by keeping Arno and his journey somewhat disconnected from the chaos of the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. The backdrop of Assassin's Creed Unity, being the French Revolution, does not get resolved at all. We only get occasional glimpses of Paris descending into turmoil through specific missions, and it never truly conveys the sense of a fully fledged revolution in progress. Now to me, this would not be an issue if Arno's personal goals were actually of interest, but for most of the game, his story lacks the weight and significance it needs until you reach the final third of the story. Most of the time, I found myself confused for the reasons behind Arno's actions, except for the overarching goal of trying to figure out who killed his father, but in reality we don't. One thing that I felt was poorly executed during the entire narrative is Elise. It seems that Elise as a character should have been given much more attention and focus. Now we know that Elise was killed off during sequence 12, which is pretty much near the end of the story. This meant that any important plot developments were not utilised after her death, making it pretty pointless. Her death just felt like a cheap plot point to include some sort of a twist in the already underwhelming story, and it was completely unnecessary. Elise was not the main character, but she was also compelling, whereas Arno lacked depth and struggled with his stance on his nation's political turmoil that is causing widespread suffering. The potential of having an Arno and Elise relationship could have been a lot better than what it was. Just like the romance between Altair and Maria, their relationship was marked by differing beliefs, yet they remained deeply in love and had a strong connection. In Assassin's Creed Unity, Arno and Elise frequently clashed and disagreed on pretty much everything. This is why I think it would have been much more enjoyable to witness the emergence of a functional relationship between a Templar and an assassin that truly worked well. Now, it's not all doom and gloom when it comes to the story. The most notable story moment for me would have to be Pierre Bellic as a character. You see, the main cliche in a video game is that a betrayal would often lead to such a massive shift in a storyline, and that is where Bellic's role came in. At first, Pierre Bellic was a friend, a mentor to Arno and a member of the Assassins. We first meet Bellic during the prison sequence. Arno, who had been thrown into the Bastille, was accused of murder, and during this sequence, Pierre Bellic, who was also imprisoned, realised that Arno was the son of Charles Dorian. You know, that man that was killed at the start of the game and Ubisoft failed to acknowledge that? Yeah, that man. We see Bellic and Arno engage in a light-hearted duel for Arno's watch. Bellic also realises that Arno possessed eagle vision to see glyphs in the corner of the room, and from this point on, the two shared a mentor-student type of bond. The next 2 months of Arno's life was pretty much being trained by Bellic and teaching him about assassins and Templars. Bellic's habit of teasing Arno was mostly light-hearted, but the game slowly transformed him into a villain, a move that didn't really seem well justified. While it did introduce an element of unpredictability to the story, it had the unfortunate side effect of weakening Bellic's bond with Arno. And this brings us to the final battle between Bellic and Arno. And it was a very memorable moment out of a very forgettable story. The fight between them both is very climactic, and the dialogue that they both spew at each other is entertaining. Killing him felt wrong, but for Arno it was the right thing to do. Bellic was the only interesting side character in the entire game, and the fact that we had to kill him off feels like such an insult by Ubisoft. And speaking of somebody getting killed off, Francois Thomas Germain has to be at least a top 3 worst villain in the entire series. The only thing that was remotely interesting about this villain was that he was a sage, but as an actual villain for the main story of Assassin's Creed Unity, it's just horrific. Whilst his predictions and wordings were often spot on, he lacked the aura that makes a villain good. Take any of the Borgias from the Ezio trilogy, they are what a villain should be like, whereas Unity's villain is the complete opposite. Okay, so now that I've said everything I had to say about the story of Assassin's Creed Unity and my problems with it, I want to touch on what actually happens to Arno after Assassin's Creed Unity, because a lot of people may not know. So after Elise dies at the end of Assassin's Creed Unity, Arno spirals into a deep depression, finding little reason to carry on. He was estranged from the Brotherhood and devoid of the motivation for revenge. So Arno drowns his sorrows in the French countryside. However, his life takes a turn when he receives a message from an old friend, Marquis de Sade, who assigns him with the task of locating a manuscript in Louis IX's tomb. Arno eventually agrees on this mission and goes on a journey to Saint Denis in pursuit of the manuscript. Along the way, he crosses paths with a young thief named Leon. Their collaboration in the quest for the artifact gradually exposes Arno to Leon's unique perspective on the world, chipping away at his grief and realizing that there is more to life than the tragedies he's endured. With this newfound outlook and a sense of purpose, Arno successfully completes his mission and reunites with the Brotherhood in Paris, now firmly believing in his ability to bring positive change to the city. Over the years, Arno continues to work alongside the assassins in France, eventually attaining the rank of Master Assassin. Although the exact circumstances and the timing of Arno's death remain unknown, it is presumed that he had children at some point in his life, as he is a direct ancestor of Callum Lynch, who is the main protagonist in the Assassin's Creed movie. Now, I want to talk about Assassin's Creed Unity's gameplay, and most importantly the parkour. Let's first start with the positive, and that is the parkour. Out of the 13 mainline games that we currently have, I can confidently say Assassin's Creed Unity's parkour is the most polished in the entire series, but I don't know if it's the best overall. In earlier Assassin's Creed games, scaling and navigating the city's rooftops were handled with grace, and when it came to descending from high places, the options were rather limited and not entirely perfect. Your choices mainly involved descending slowly, taking a leap of faith into a haystack, or jumping with the hope that the landing would not be lethal. However, in Assassin's Creed Unity, a game changer is introduced. You can now utilize a specific button to make Arno swiftly descend the exterior of a building. This drastically enhances the travel experience, adding a sense of fun and eliminating the need for haystack dives, unless you're of course looking to hide. The animations in Assassin's Creed Unity are brand new compared to previous games, and they honestly look so smooth. The paths that you can take whilst freerunning are noticeable, and it just seems so satisfying to watch. One of my favourite Assassin's Creed YouTubers to watch when it comes to parkour is Altair Stuff. I believe his favourite game is Assassin's Creed Unity, and deservedly so. For somebody that enjoys parkour, Unity is the perfect game to showcase it off, so check his channel out if you want. One thing I did notice is that when you're operating closer to the ground, the mechanics start to show some cracks. Small barriers and low obstacles often become frustrating obstacles, as the game struggles to predict your desired direction. This will lead to moments of frustration, especially during stealth missions or close quarters combat. I did notice that there are occasional moments when Arno seems to hit a roadblock, not following your commands, and the camera can sometimes disrupt your immersion in the game. But overall, it's a solid parkour system. When it comes to combat and stealth, I'm not going to discuss those because I've already made a full video ranking every combat system and stealth system in the series, and if you want to check out my opinion on Unity stealth and combat, then check those two videos out. Okay, now let's discuss another aspect of gameplay, Arno's progression. Initially, you won't have access to all of the assassin's abilities in the game. Instead, you'll earn skill points as you complete missions, which can be spent to acquire new skills such as double assassinations. Skill points are just one of the 4 types of currency in Unity. The second type of currency is Assassin's Points. These are used for enhancing your armor and weapons that you can either purchase or earn. Additionally, there is also the regular in-game currency, which is handy for buying weapons and armor or upgrading the cafe theatre. Upgrading the theatre provides you with a steady source of income. However, I don't really recommend it because it doesn't really provide you with much currency. There are also Helix points, which have stirred some controversy. These points can be purchased with real world money and primarily serve the purpose of allowing you to buy armor and weapons before you've accumulated enough in-game currency or unlocked them. This is of course entirely optional, since you can eventually unlock all the weapons and armor by completing specific missions. Unless you want to give your money to Ubisoft, I don't recommend using Helix points. The gameplay system has kind of taken a more RPG feel than ever before. Each mission now comes with a rating, represented by diamonds ranging from 1 to 5. This rating offers a clear indication of the mission's difficulty, and as you serve to complete missions, you unlock additional gear and weapons available for purchase. But you have to be prepared though, because as you take on those 5-star missions, the enemies get considerably tougher. Now, I want to talk about something that stood out to me in this game, and those are those Helix Rifts. The Helix Rifts alongside the murder mysteries was some of my favourite content in this game. Helix Rifts are basically in-game anomalies that allow you as the player to escape from Abstergo server scan, which pretty much propels Arno into an alternate time-space. I believe there's a total of 7 Helix Rift missions in this game, and the goal of these Helix Rifts is to achieve the necessary data point score. Now, my only issue with Helix Rift in Unity is that they don't operate how they would in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is the game after. You see, in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, the Helix Rift allowed you to play as an entirely different character, Lydia Frye, aka the granddaughter of Jacob Frye. Now imagine in Assassin's Creed Unity we're able to play and access characters from Arno's bloodline, whether that be ancestors or descendants in different time periods. Nonetheless though, it's still fun, even if we were able to play as Arno's bloodline through the time periods that we got thrown into. These time periods were of course medieval Paris, the Belle Epoque, and Nazi-occupied Paris. My personal favourite era was when the Eiffel Tower was still under construction. It was evident that Ubisoft had to somehow incorporate the Eiffel Tower into this game, given that it is set in Paris, and they did execute this quite well, even if it is temporary. I would love to see the return of Helix Rift into a future Assassin's Creed game. Imagine for example in Assassin's Creed Codename Red that's set in Japan, we're able to access these rifts. It would allow various samurais to venture into diverse time periods of Japan, like feudal Japan during the Sengoku period, the Edo period, or maybe even the Bakumatsu period. I understand that it might be a bit of a stretch, but why not ask? So yeah, the Helix Rifts are a personal favourite feature of mine in Assassin's Creed Unity. Let's talk about customization in Assassin's Creed Unity and how great it is. It's a very unique and complex system, and it's the first we've seen of this idea of customization from the entire series. We're able to change Arno's appearance with a boatload of customizable clothing. Head, chest, forearms, waist and legs are all interchangeable. That kind of sounds like a gym routine the way I just worded that. Anyway, these features can be customized to tailor what you need, and are not just appearance based. Let's start with the colours. From here, you're able to select from a preset of colours that will change the appearance of the loadout you're wearing. The amount of colour choices you have is quite insane. My personal favourite would have to be this all white one. I just find it so clean. Then we're able to customise the head. And no, not Arno's actual head. The head section has so many types of hoods to equip, each with their own perks to them. The more you scroll down, the better they become in terms of stats. The same thing applies for chest, forearms, waist and legs. The amount of combinations you're able to create just from choosing what you want is absurd. If you don't have enough of the currency to buy what you want, you can always hack it, which I believe is the microtransaction side of the game, so let's try and stay away from that side, shall we? Unity also has a pretty good skill tree too, and thankfully it's quite simple and not as complex as Valhalla's mess of a skill tree. It consists of 4 sections: melee, stealth, ranged and health, which are all pretty self-explanatory. Melee will allow you to gain mastery of a range of weapons, which further improve your abilities. You can also unlock additional melee skills to improve damage or add new movesets. The stealth section consists of skills that improve your stealth, so you can enhance crowd blending, unlock double assassinations, improve lockpicking and so on. The range section consists of features that will enhance things such as adding poisonous gas on top of the already smoke bomb, enhance your phantom blade, allow you to use pistols and muskets and so on. And the last section, being health, improves of course your endurance and health, allowing you to withstand more damage and heal more effectively. The last thing I want to go over is weapons. Unity brought a fresh selection of weaponry into play, including swords, spears, handguns, rifles, and even guillotine guns. These diverse weapons, coupled with the combat system, sets Unity's combat apart with its innovation and increased level of challenge. It forces you to truly go into mastering the combat mechanics and encourages a more tactical approach, which moves beyond the instinct of charging headlong into an enemy. So yeah, the customization in this game is extraordinary. In fact, it's definitely the best in the entire series, and with how innovative it is, it's a shame other aspects of this game overshadows how good customizing Arnold's character can truly be. Now before I conclude this video, there's a few things I want to talk about that I feel like mentioning, and I figured this would be the best place to include them. The first is bloat. If you take a look at Assassin's Creed Unity's map, the best word to describe it is bloat. There's just an absurd amount of junk on the screen. Why that is? Well, you'd have to ask the developers. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to add this many collectibles on a map, but whoever they are, I hope you're watching this. My question to you is why? It's hard to navigate that map trying to find a sync point because of how cluttered it is. Yeah, you can toggle different icons, but that is not a good thing. The main focus on the map is to be as clean as possible. A great example of this is Assassin's Creed 3. I find the map in that game to be very easy to navigate. You'd know where the sync points are, the main missions, the side missions and the shops. Whereas with Assassin's Creed Unity, the icons are almost inside of each other, making it almost impossible to maneuver. One of the main problems is due to how many chests there are to collect, and they weren't even worth it as you would only receive 250 leverage from them. Another problem I had was the voice acting. For instance, it's worth noting that the voice actors in Unity do not adopt region appropriate accents, but use English accents instead. You could start a cutscene with the most French sounding name, but the accent would consist of a regular British guy. It's not really a big issue as you could also just play the game using a different language such as French. Or if you want to go a bit over the top, try Japanese. You will not regret it. And the last problem I had with this game was the impact it had. What I mean by this is that I'm sure we all know Assassin's Creed Unity released with an absurd amount of bugs and glitches. Like seriously, it was meme worthy how bad it was. And because of the buggy launch, it faulted its success and a lot of people don't actually play the game because of it. When in reality, these bugs and glitches are no more. So when you talk about Assassin's Creed Unity in 2023, the topic of glitches and bugs always get brought up. In fact, that's exactly what I'm doing right now, and I don't like that. Assassin's Creed Unity is a game I wish I could love. In past videos, I've described this game as potential to be the greatest Assassin's Creed game ever, but the expectations for that title are not possible. I want to love this game, but I just can't. The story was underwhelming, the main protagonist was not developed well, side characters were not interesting, and the setting is stunning but lacks impact. I do wish for future Assassin's Creed games, Ubisoft returns to Unity's engine but updated because technology is always advancing day by day. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, it'll help me out a lot. And with that said, I'll see you guys in my next one.